Thanks for tuning in to more handicapping action for the PlaybookSports.com report here on the OFN Today with Marc Lawrence, of course, at PlaybookSports.com. And Mark, we have one more game to go in the college football season. That's the national championship game. And one more week to go with the regular season in the NFL. And then we can start talking playoffs.
It's unbelievable how fast time flies, Greg, especially when you're having fun, as we did in the bowl games.
Yes.
I might want to point out that the college football bowl guide went 25-8-1.
Yes.
Overall,
Lots of money to be made.
Yeah, very, very good. That's 72% on every game. That's just really, really a great season. And there's a special offer for anybody that signs up for next year's football newsletter. That bowl guide is included as a free bonus. So anybody can check that special offer out at playbooksports.com.
And I know it's not good for fans, but it actually was good for handicappers regarding this whole COVID thing, because the combination of the COVID and the players deciding to forego their final season and the coaching changes, all of those things work against all of those teams that had to deal with those issues. So it really didn't matter if the line was 10 or 12 or whatever, because like the Kansas State game that we talked about, how it was, come on, Kansas State, this should be a no-brainer. We went over the whole reasons why, and LSU went from a 2.5-point favorite to a 4.5-point dog. That wasn't even nearly enough. You could have probably given them 10 and we would have still been okay. I'll go ahead, I'll give them 10, and they just annihilated them.
Let me tell you this, they did take 10 on game day. It went as high as 10.
Wow.
Yes, Kansas State kicked off as a 10-point favorite on game day. That's how maddening things were with that football game. And, people love information. They love hot sides and so forth and whatnot. And, we had used it as a best bet in the Playbook Guide magazine. We didn't lose a best bet. We didn't lose an angle. We had just tremendous, obviously great success with that. And when I saw that game come up Monday, and I knew that this line was absolutely going to run, but when it got to 10 points, I was absolutely flabbergasted.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then, of course, throw in the really cool upsets like Utah State and Central Florida, both getting 7 and over 2 on the money line. So there was a lot of good stuff this bowl season. There was a lot of money to be made, and hopefully that's exactly what obviously anybody who subscribed to your newsletter, they made money. They had to have. If they didn't, you're doing something wrong. So, but one more game to go. And last week we talked about the whole situation with Alabama and how hard it is to repeat. And Georgia, the big thing with Georgia was could they get their confidence back? Well, all right. Looks like they got their confidence back. But this is still Alabama. The thing that I think in my mind works completely against Georgia again, and I can't say I completely disagree with how the line went, because I believe, what was it? It started out 1.5 Alabama.
Well, I don't know as if I honestly ever saw Alabama favored. I thought the game would open pick, and I never saw that. So I saw
it on one of the VegasInsider.com had Alabama 1.5.
Well, maybe it did for a blip. Okay,
yeah, right. Maybe the opening line, and then a few hours later, whammo, and it went to 3, Georgia. And if that's in fact the way that it went, and a lot of people started putting money on Georgia, and I could see why. If you watch both games, I could see why. But I mean, it's almost like, are you not seeing what you're doing? Georgia is the favorite over Alabama again. What? I mean, come on. I'm just sorry. This is not a good thing for Georgia. And this is why I hedged my bet with Alabama last week. I'm not going to make any money off of that particular wager that we talked about last week, but I feel confident that I'm at least going to get my money back. And even more so, that I'll probably even put more money on Alabama this week, because I didn't think that they were going to be the underdog. I honestly thought there was a chance that Alabama was going to be a 3 to a 6-point favorite. I just can't believe Georgia's now at 2, but I just can't believe that they were a 3-point favorite. I don't know. What are people looking at? I mean, Georgia can't beat Alabama, and Alabama does not lose when they're in this role. So I don't understand it.
Well, irrespective of the handicap involved in the game, the reason why Georgia is the favorite in the football game is just flat out simple. It's because the odds makers opened up Georgia a 6.5 point favorite against Alabama 2 games ago. They live and die by their power rankings, okay? Alabama beats Georgia. They pummel Georgia. They cannot, in their power rankings, flip that line. Their power rankings won't do that over the course of a result of 2 football games.
Now, what is power rankings? Is that what, part of their computer model?
Yes, exactly right. So, if they rate Alabama 100 and they rate Georgia 106.5, hence Georgia a 6.5 favorite in the football game. After the football game, they cannot rate Alabama higher than Georgia on a power ranking for the sake of one football game alone. So they have to adjust rather than do a topsy-turvy flip-flop on that line.
So in other words, they're locked in.
They're locked in.
Exactly. Their hands are tied.
Here, to put it simpler, okay, had these two teams not met in the Southeast Conference Championship game and not played, and there was never a time when Georgia was favored over Alabama, I would not be surprised at all to see Alabama the small favorite in the football game. But they cannot do that because they already proclaimed Georgia to be a 6.5 point power rated better football team than Alabama just 2 games ago. They cannot make an over adjustment that much that fast this quick. That's the reason. That's the reason why.
So then people like me who were going to take Alabama, that ends up being a good thing. If you like Alabama and that's the way you want to go, then that's why you have to try and take advantage of that, and hopefully it goes your way.
True. I mean, you've got other issues inside the game when you start to get into the handicapping aspects of it. There's no John Mechie for Alabama this particular football game. Sure. Okay, he's a big loss to the offense. He was there at the beginning of that football game, so that's not there. Okay, so usually a player of his magnitude would end up making the line go up even more, but it didn't. Okay, because obviously they had to side to Georgia for the power spread. And I think personally that this game is going to close out more like Georgia 2 in the football game. It's not going to get over 3, and I think the money's going to start coming to Alabama from the sharps, from the public, and from just about everybody else that watches college football this year.
Yeah, my bookie already has it at 2.
There you go. And hey, I mean, what happens on Monday? This game may even be pick'em for all we know. Okay, because of the flavor of that. I do know that in the playbook football newsletter this particular week, we tore that game down. We've devoted a full page to the football game, and inside our full page devotion, in the write-up of the game, we have a tale of the tape. And the tale of the tape is basically listing the 10 most positive offensive and defensive stats for each football team side by side. And when you break these 20 total stats down, Georgia has the edge in 11 of the 20 stats, meaning the game is almost even from a statistical tail of the tape perspective, which is basically a little bit what the line is telling us here. And that's why I believe this line will get closer to pick 'em than it will stay at 3 come kickoff time.
Yeah, because look, we saw it last week, and the bottom line right now with college football is, and we saw it specifically with Georgia, Michigan even, is that the only, which is why I stressed it, and I still feel the same way with Georgia in this game, is that to me it's about up here with Georgia, because you spend 3 or 4 or 5 years like Georgia has recruiting 4- and 5-star athletes, and you play Michigan, and you probably got a couple of 5-stars, but predominantly 4 stars, and even 3 stars. That's what they're working with. You do this for 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row, you know which team is more talented. It's just that's the way it is, especially at the lower ranks. This is not the NFL, so it's even more where you have these kids are just more talented. They're better. So it's a matter of coaching, but more often than not, it's up here. Are they ready for the big stage and all that? So Georgia proved that against Michigan, that we have the better athletes. They immediately got off to a lead, and that was important for them, and the game was over. But this Alabama thing, I've seen it so many times, and you have as well, in all sorts of sports, all over. And combine that with the fact, and I got this out of some of these stats, obviously, in the newsletter, that what is it? Saban is 25-1 straight up versus his former assistants, including 3-0 in the postseason by an average of 38-10. Also, Alabama in the last 5 as single-digit dogs, they've won all 5 of them. And then throw in the fact that Georgia just has this, obstacle in front of them when it comes to Alabama. And who knows what would have happened if they would have beaten Alabama the first matchup when they had the big lead. If they would have won that one, we might have a completely different story over the last 3 or 4 years. Maybe Georgia would have won a couple of national championships. So again,
if they win that first game, okay, then it's Alabama revenge. This line would be shorter and not longer.
No, I was talking about the first meeting 3 or 4 years ago in the SEC championship game.
Not the
if
SEC.
Georgia had won that first game, then maybe they would have won the next 2 national championships. Their confidence, we could beat this team, but they didn't. And every time they get a chance, they can't. And they were supposed to beat them finally a few weeks ago because they were the better team and they had crushed everybody, and they didn't. So I can't imagine why anybody, I'm sorry, I can't imagine why anybody would take Georgia in this game. It just doesn't make any sense to someone like me that's been doing this for so long and to put the numbers together and also understands the game.
Well, you've got your Georgia glasses on, okay, or your Alabama glasses looking at Georgia, okay? Not even looking at all about the Georgia side of the football game or the pluses they bring to the game, okay? It's just anti-Georgia, 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 okay? I get it. I understand. And if I liked Alabama as you do, I would probably be talking much the same way. But you still have to acknowledge the checks and balances that Georgia brings to the football game,
yes.
Okay?
I think they're a better team on paper.
Well, they may well be the better football team, okay? Yeah. They were all season long, okay, until they met in the SEC title game.
Yes.
Never has a college football playoff champion repeated. They've tried 3 times. They failed all 3 times. Never has a team in the college championship game that had the revenge chip on their shoulder lost to the spread. That favors Georgia in the football game. So suddenly, if you keep looking and prodding and turning leaves over, you're going to find cases to make for Georgia in the contest here.
Sure.
So the bottom line comes to what are you most comfortable with, what you found and what you feel. If your gut tells you that Alabama should not be the dog, they're the right side of the football game, it's as simple as that. You don't need to continue to keep looking any further, but you have to at least be aware of what Georgia's bringing to the table in the contest.
Yeah, I think if you take Georgia in this one, honestly, I think it has to come from your gut. I really do, because you have the better team. I just don't think there's any doubt about that. We've seen all these games that both teams have played all year, but that doesn't mean anything, because not only have we seen teams like Alabama been in this situation before where they have not looked as pretty as the other teams, that doesn't mean anything. They can still win the games when it counts at the right times, and just like what happened in the Auburn game. Because I think that's what I think a lot of people will say is, oh, come on, Alabama. They needed a last-second drive against Auburn, or else they wouldn't even be here. And if it wasn't for Desmond Ridder looking like crap, Cincinnati might have actually had a good football game down in the fourth quarter, and this is just not the same Alabama team. Yes, you could say all of that, but the fact is that sometimes when a team is destined to win, and sometimes when a team has their back against the wall, like Alabama has had in a couple of circumstances this year, including the Auburn game, and they find a way to win, sometimes it's just their year. So.
Well, it's also the commander steering the ship. It happens to be Nick Saban, who, as you mentioned here, does a lot lot of good things. In big football games and against former assistants. He just dominates them. He's a dominator. So, this is an intriguing football game. We're going to get the best 2 teams in college football playing for everything Monday night. We couldn't ask for anything more. I'll be deeply disappointed if this is a one-side football game. I don't believe it will be. I think this is going to go maybe largely down to who scores last in the contest. And if it is, we'll all be glued to the TV till the end of the contest.
I'll say this. I think if Georgia wins this game, I think they're going to win this game before the fourth quarter. I think they're going to blow them out if they win this game. I can't imagine Georgia winning a close game without. I just can't. I can't imagine them, when the stakes are all on the line and the pressure's there, that they are going to find a way. I can't see it, but I can see them somehow getting off to an early start. All of a sudden, the confidence is there. Hey, we can beat this team. And then they do that, and all of a sudden, all the talent that they have that's better than Alabama shines and comes through, and then it's 37-14, game over. Because we've seen Alabama get blown out before in big games. It happens, just like you said. It's not easy to win back-to-back national championships. So it's happened before, but this situation has never happened before. Again, in this spot where he's been not only is he the defending champ, but he's coming in as the dog.
Well, to your point about Georgia and scoring, one of those 20 tail of the tape stats is actually how many points each team averages in the fourth quarter of their football games this year. Alabama, number one in the country, they average 10.1 points per game in the fourth quarter of every game. Georgia just 6.5. So the edge goes to Alabama when it comes down to the late stages of the football game. Hence, if Alabama's trailing, you won't see panic on the Alabama side. Not at all. Georgia, you may, okay? Because, they're going to have to hold Alabama down to retain some sort of a lead or at least crawl back into the contest here. So that could end up being the key stat of those 20 stats, how many points each team averages in the fourth quarter of a football game this season.
And again, I think if Georgia, we said this last week, I think if they win this game, the floodgates might open up for them the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, where they could go on and win 3 national championships.
Yeah, because all the 4 and 5 star recruits are going to definitely head to Georgia.
No reason to stop heading to Georgia.
No, exactly.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, we can beat anybody now.
Exactly.
So, sort of like what happened with Clemson. As soon as they won that game in the last second, and Deshaun Watson threw that touchdown pass, and they beat them, they went on the run. They had started it the year before, but this was really the beginning of their run. It just stopped last year, maybe momentarily, but it was a nice little 4 or 5 year run that they had because of it. We'll see if Georgia can do the same. All right, so that's college football. Meanwhile, the NFL. We are into the final week of the regular season. And a couple of games on Saturday. We have a Sunday night game, and then we have 3-day action, 3-day weekend next weekend. So you have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday games in the NFL next week because you're going to have 12 teams playing. So I mentioned that's going to be quite exciting. To have a lot of NFL playoff games over the weekend. We'll see how that unfolds, but we have one more week to go. And what I want to start off, first I want to ask you about one of the games on Saturday. That's the Dallas-Philly game, because the line started at 7.5. Matter of fact, it was 7.5 yesterday, and it was plus 250 on the money line for Philly. I looked at, like I always do before I come on the air with you, I went to the website, the MyBookie website. Dallas 4.5. Philadelphia 185. So what did I do? I typed in Dallas, Philadelphia, who's not playing? The only thing I saw was Micah Parsons. He's not worth 3 points. So why did Dallas, at least I don't think so. So why did Dallas go from 7.5 to 4.5?
Because there's a lot of speculation about who is and who isn't going to be playing in the game, and everybody's being tight-lipped about it. Philadelphia head coach Nick Sirianni still hasn't made a decision whether or not he's going to rest Jalen Hurts and or the other starters in the football game. And the same thing for Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys. So we don't know what the game plan exactly is. There's all speculation, largely by the odds makers and the experts who feel like they have an edge in a football game like this. So hence, you're seeing a game peak out at Dallas -7. Now we're at 4.5 as we're speaking here today. Any whisper, any rumor of any player not playing in a football game is going to move this line again. It's chaotic. It's crazy. And come game time, the game will settle in based upon the last word that was heard on who's playing and who's not playing in the contest. And a lot of this has to do in this game because both teams have already clinched a playoff spot, and they can't do a whole lot of improving or backpedaling in this game here. Dallas will either be a 3 or a 4 seed. Philadelphia will either be a 6 or a 7 seed. Win, lose, or draw on both sides of the game. Nothing a whole lot is going to change dramatically in the contest. So it depends upon the coach's approach to the game. Do they want to risk injury? Do they want to prepare themselves? Does Dallas want to go into the playoffs on a 3-game losing streak? Probably not. Does Philadelphia want to continue their winning ways as they're doing right now? This is a hot football team, has won 7 of the last 9 games. Probably so. And I think those factors, those two factors I just laid out, are probably more determining in this football game than any other speculation there is. I think you're going to see a well-played football game here, and I think this is going to be played at playoff-like intensity.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, especially
Yes.
since it's the only game on Saturday night after the Kansas City Denver game.
Yes.
So, okay. And I like Philadelphia in that game myself. And I already took them, so I actually was fortunate. I placed a parlay yesterday, starting with Philadelphia on the money line at 250. And even I was thinking about, I was saying, maybe I should wait until the weekend because of COVID. So maybe I should wait, and the fact that you didn't know whether or not players would sit. And I knew the lines obviously would jump like this. And I said, well, but I can't. I'll take the chance because I'm not going to put a lot of money on it. And if Philly wins the game and I get 250 on the beginning of a parlay, then it's a good way, and I'm not investing a whole lot. So why not? So I got a little lucky as far as that's concerned, but they haven't won the game yet. But there is an interesting stat from Playbook, the newsletter, which favors Philadelphia in this game, and that is that Dallas is 0-5 straight up and against the spread in their last 5 divisional games that are played on Saturday. How about that? That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Regular season games, those are.
Regular season games.
That's exactly what this happens to be. Sort of a little bit of a what you might call a biorhythm type thing, where they're a little bit out of their element. Their bodies are in a situation like that. Whether or not it is a factor in this game remains to be determined here. But you hit on a point here that I want to elaborate just a little bit on, and you mentioned about who's playing and who's not. Well, a lot of who's playing and who's not are going to be coaches' decisions here, obviously. But what I do know and what I've learned, and I've learned from a real good source about the National Football League and everything they're doing these days, is they are paying no attention whatsoever to testing players for COVID. The only players that are being tested for COVID are on Mondays after the games have played in the weekend. Oh. And the reason they're being tested on Mondays is because they don't want to have to sit players for the games. So even if they,
smart.
Yes, very smart. And even if they know or even have an inkling that they have COVID and they're not showing symptoms, they are going to play. And they'll test them on Mondays. If they happen to test positive, they've got 5 days till the weekend to come back negative and play again the next week. That's their approach here right now.
That's good. Yeah.
Yes, and that's keeping the boat in the water is what it's doing.
All right. Hockey should figure that out.
Yes, they should.
Meanwhile, let me ask you, because we did this last week. If you had 3 dogs to choose from, Philly's one of them, even though their line is, like I said, now dropped to plus 180, 185. You have Atlanta, which is about same thing, around 175, 180 on the money line. And you have the Miami Dolphins, who are also a little higher. They're at about plus 230 on the money line. You got to choose between those 3 because looking at the newsletter, there were no outright upsets for either of those 3. So if you had to choose, which one would you lean towards more?
Well, in ranking order, for me, they would be Philadelphia, Miami, and Atlanta. I wouldn't even consider Atlanta. But the first 2 games, I would rank them 1-2 Philly in that role, basically because, in the New England football game, New England has a little bit to play for here, a little bit of unfinished business in this contest here. But I like Miami in the game. They've given New England fits in South Beach in the past. Even when Tom Brady played, he did not want to play in Miami. It was a place that he just ended up losing more games than he won in his career.
Well, Evan Lazar from CLNS Media, we do the Patriots show every week.
Yes.
And he said that in Bill Belichick's tenure, from December, January games, that the Patriots played in Miami, the Miami Dolphins won 7 out of 9.
There you go. That's exactly what I'm telling you, okay? So this is not a good spot here for New England coming into the football game. Then there's the pressures of having to be able to improve their playoff positioning and doing just this. And what can Miami play for? A winning season. I think that's a big, big carrot for Miami to have to play for to finish the season 9-8 as opposed to 8-9. That gives them a real nice offseason and a lot to build on. So I would make them in Philadelphia a 1-2 combo. If you're going to play Philadelphia on the money line, I think you have to back it up with Miami. Or if you're going to play Miami on the money line, I think you have to back it up with Philadelphia.
Okay. So because the New Orleans-Atlanta situation is you don't know. I mean, it's a rookie coach, so they're going to still try to win. This is still a building process there, uh, and and the only thing with the Saints is that the whole offense thing is just so bad, but they have really stayed in and won games because of their defense. The defense has been fantastic for them this season. Just imagine if they had a little bit of offense, or if this was the Drew Brees days, what this team could have been. But when you
Or
dive
Greg,
into
go ahead and say it. If it was the Jameis Winston days, even.
even,
Yeah.
yes, just a couple of months ago,
Yeah, exactly right.
this team would be clearly a playoff team. It's hard to imagine, though, that the Saints are a favorite. San Francisco is a dog this week. And if it plays out that way, New Orleans is going to go to the playoffs and not San Francisco. It's like, where did that come from? Because San Francisco's played so well in the second half of the season, and the Saints have been, they haven't done anything. I didn't even realize that was possible until I read it. Well, that doesn't mean I think that's going to happen, because I don't. But that's very possible that the Saints are going to, because they're favored, and San Francisco is not, against a team trying to win a division championship, that New Orleans will beat out San Francisco for the playoffs.
Well, New Orleans has just hung around. As you say, San Francisco has earned their keep, okay? They've won 7 of their 9 football games. They're the type of team that no one is going to want to play in the NFC side of the playoffs. No one. And, this Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance talk, you can squash that, okay? And you mark this down. We are going to see Trey Lance at quarterback from now until Trey Lance is traded or retires from San Francisco. I think that the Jimmy Garoppolo days are in the rearview mirror. They know he's not their quarterback of the future. They know Trey Lance is. They hawked the future for him with 3 first-round draft picks. Right now, they're in position to earn their keep, and they're going to earn it with Trey Lance in this football game. That's what they used him for last week, to set him up for this particular week. So expect all-out Trey Lance in this football contest.
Well, look, I was telling people for the couple of months when he wasn't playing, and San Francisco was going on this nice run, and there was this. I mean, this was right around the Mac Jones talk. Remember, they were on a hot streak too, about how great Mac Jones is, and all these other quarterbacks stink, and they were basically throwing Trey Lance into it. And I just kept saying, look, all I know is what I saw against Arizona, and Trey Lance did not lose that game against Arizona, and Arizona was undefeated at the time. He set his team up to win that football game. They lost it. They made some bad plays. They had some bad penalties. Not his fault they lost that game. And he was a rookie playing in his first start, I believe, at that point.
Yes.
So I felt he had shown me enough that, he'll be all right. It may take him a couple of years to be the finished product, but I could already tell in that first matchup that was a good start. It's not that, look, it's Houston. We get that. But I think people, and look what happened with Zach Wilson last week. He finally got it in his big game against Tampa Bay. You have to give these young quarterbacks time. I still 100% also believe, whether it's Lance, whether it's Wilson, maybe even Trevor Lawrence, that in the next 2 or 3 years, at least one, if not 2 or 3 of those guys are going to end up as better quarterbacks than Mac Jones. It doesn't mean Mac Jones is going to be a good quarterback, but he has a ceiling, I think, that he's going to reach pretty early in his NFL career. Then he's going to stop. Well, I think a couple of those other guys are going to pass him. Could be in a couple of years, could be 3-4 years, but I think we're already starting to see that sometimes these other kids, they just need a little bit more time.
Well, let's give Mac Jones his due, okay? He did answer the bell. I don't think he's ceilinged out by any means
Not
close.
yet, no.
It's all in comparison, comparative to the fact that the other draft picks really laid an egg, okay, in a sense, as far as productivity goes.
Because of their talent around them and their coaching staff and their foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
The ugliness of the Urban Meyer situation in Jacksonville.
Yep.
But those other quarterbacks are going to improve. There's no question about that. They were highly sought after first-round draft picks. They'll be more seasoned next year. Mac Jones may have a little bit of the sophomore blues next year for the success that he met with this year, because everything does return to the mean. And, what has been successful one year usually comes back to the next. The opposite side of the coin, when you've really labored, you kind of tend to improve the next year. So I think we'll see a passing of the 2 quarterbacks of the guards that way next football season here. Now, does that mean that Mac Jones will not have a will have a worse career than the other quarterbacks. That remains to be seen. Obviously, it depends upon obviously the talent that's going to surround him. But right now, there is no talent surrounding Trevor Lawrence or Zach Jones, even Justin Fields right now. So
Sure. Yeah.
they're hurting for a reason. They're not playing well for a reason. So I give them a mulligan for this first year. And I would say this. I would say that when Jacksonville does its overhaul, they had best not give up on Trevor Lawrence. Not
No, no.
not based on this year, because that will come back to haunt them in the worst of ways. Because all he needs to do is settle in with the right team and the right player and the right personnel, and suddenly we're talking about the worst trade in National Football League history.
Yeah, and it better be an offensive coach.
Yes.
I mean, I don't understand why they wouldn't even consider Byron Leftwich. I mean, he's
I'm sure they are.
perfect for there.
Yes, I'm sure they are.
Absolutely perfect. He's an offensive guy. He's a quarterback guy. The whole thing. So, speaking of Arizona, Arizona is one of the teams I like this week as far as the favorites, and they've got that dynamic we were just talking about with San Francisco. Arizona's trying to win the division, LA's trying to win the division, and San Francisco is trying to get into the postseason. I think San Francisco is going to find a way to get into the postseason, no matter who the quarterback is. I think they're going to find a way to get into the postseason because it's not like the Rams are playing like they were at the beginning of the season. They're winning games because they're very talented, but they're not peaking yet. They're not going in. So maybe they have a really good game against San Francisco and knock them out, and then I'll think differently. But they're just not peaking just yet. Because of that, I still like the Packers over the Rams when it's said and done in the NFC. But I think but as far as Arizona, we liked them last week. We talked about that last week, taking both Arizona and Cincinnati as outright dogs, winning the games. Those were our two big upsets last week, and both of them came through and won for us. And I just feel that now that Arizona's got that bad stretch out of the way, Seattle, they don't care. Their season's over. They're on the road now. They don't care anymore. I think Arizona's going to blow them out on Sunday. It might even be Pete Carroll's last game. Who knows? And I think San Francisco is going to beat the Rams. So I think so. I'm going to take. I'm going with Arizona minus the 6, and I'm taking San Francisco, and I'm going to get about plus 185 on the money line.
I'm going to hitch up the wagon with you on both of those plays, Greg. I agree on both sides of the contest here. Arizona's big win last week doesn't mean anything if they lose this football game. And on the flip side, you talk about San Francisco and the Rams. You talked about getting to the Super Bowl. All you need to do is ask yourself, Aaron Rodgers or Matthew Stafford. There's no comparison, okay? Matthew Stafford's a nice quarterback, but he's hurt again. We're seeing that in his numbers. His numbers are plummeting each and every week because his back is bad again. It was bad in Detroit to the point where he had to finally rest himself and take himself out of the lineup. We're seeing it again here right now. He's really struggling coming down the stretch is Matthew Stafford here. And that's going to be, they'll be able to expose that. These other coaches see this on film, and they'll be able to expose that. They'll be blitzing him like all get out. To put some pressure on him. So I think this is an ideal spot for San Francisco in this football game to continue their winning ways.
Yeah, because San Francisco also has good matchups history recently.
Yes,
the
they
Rams. They beat them earlier this year as a dog, 3.5-point dogs. They beat them by 21 in November, and they've won the last 3 outright, straight up and against the spread. But I also remember we said San Francisco's playing well. They've won 6 out of 8 straight up against the spread, and as you noted in the newsletter, they're 7-1 in those 8. In the stats, so they're not doing it with smoke and mirrors. They're outplaying their opposition. Meanwhile, here's another note that you have on the newsletter that also works in the Niners' favor. The Rams are 1-7 straight up and against the spread in their last 8 at home when they're taking on a division opponent. When they're coming off back-to-back road wins, including 0-6 in the last 6 straight up and against the spread. So those were all icing on the cake numbers for me. I liked San Francisco before I saw that. That just piled it on and made me feel that much more. That's why I said I don't care who the quarterback is. I feel good about Lance or Garoppolo in this spot.
Well, if I told you of a team in the National Football League that has, in the last 40 games they've played this opponent, they've lost the spread only 10 times, and they're playing with some need in this football game.
30-10.
Well, they're 28-10-2 to the spread.
10-2.
at Los Angeles as a visitor in the series. So that's only 10
Visitor.
points, 10 point spread losses in their last 40 games in the series
Wow.
as a visitor. That's a pretty strong number.
Yes. All right. So, and we'll see what happens with Seattle and Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. I don't know what's going to go on. I guess Pete Carroll is probably. I don't know. The thing is he brings so much weight to the if he wants to coach. That's the tricky part because he's like almost treated like, and it kind of deserves it. If, Seattle's that's what they have is the Super Bowl. They don't have anything else. They've got the Super Bowl, so and it's not like they've had 5-win seasons. They've had a couple of bad seasons here or there, but for the most part, they've been a winning franchise. And but I could see why also sometimes it's time to move on. The question is it Carroll and Wilson back next year? I highly doubt it. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe both are gone, one are gone, but I can't see both coming back.
I don't see both of them coming back either here. And, eventually you have to cut the cord. And I think it's time for Pete Carroll and Seattle to do just that. The erosion has been in the making. If you take a look at Seattle the last 3 or 4 years, go look inside the playbook preview guide magazine and look at their offensive and defensive numbers. They're allowing more yards than they're gaining each of the last 3 or 4 years in a row. That's not the makeup of a good quality football team here. You can't continue to keep getting out-yarded in football games and expect to win or even expect to be a good football team. And it's catching up with Seattle right now as we speak. I think Pete Carroll's days are probably numbered. Likely I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him in his last game on Sunday. And come Black Monday, it could be Pete Carroll headlining, getting a pink slip.
Who should get the pink slip should be their GM,
Yep.
because it's been they had a good stretch early on with a lot of including Russell Wilson and a lot of good players, and there've been some good drafts. But over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of bad drafts. And throw in the fact that they had the Jamal Adams trade, which I am loving as a Jet fan, and I loved it at the time, but I never thought that the Jets were going to be getting a top 10 draft pick out of it. And not even now, I love it even more. So just imagine you're thinking about maybe rebuilding, and you don't have a first round draft pick, which tells you that if you're really thinking about rebuilding, you know who's going, and that's Russell Wilson.
For sure, because that's where the rebuild starts. Okay, not that Russell Wilson is by any means a bad quarterback.
No.
If he lands on another football team, that football team will become the team. Okay, in other words, this team now has Russell Wilson as its quarterback. My goodness, look out! Russell Wilson ends up at Indianapolis this year instead of Carson Wentz. My goodness, I mean, they're the team to beat. Maybe perhaps in the AFC with Russell Wilson. Carson Wentz has proven that there's a reason why he was not kept around in Philadelphia, and he gets worse with each passing game. Russell Wilson joining a team like that would make a huge difference and a huge turnaround. Russell Wilson joining a lot of other potentially good football teams. Russell Wilson joining the Cleveland Browns would be a huge pickup.
Yeah, there you go.
Are you with me? As a for instance.
You think Baker will be back?
I believe he will be back, and I think you have to give him the mulligan because of the injuries. He was battered, from pillar to post all football season long, and he didn't quit. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. Didn't use it as an excuse. I think they really like him in Cleveland here, and we'll see a new fresh Russell Wilson or new fresh Baker Mayfield next year. If he doesn't produce next year, that could be sayonara because he'll be at the end of his contract as well. So okay. I think they're going to give him that one more year. Yes.
Because you would have to think that they know his health more than anybody, and if they really believe that's been a big part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to bring it back. We talked about Philly upset and San Francisco upset. A couple of the upsets I'm going with this week. One is Cincinnati. We're just talking about Cleveland. Somebody's got to tell me why is Cincinnati a 6-point dog and getting 2-1 on the money line. I don't understand this. Okay, so Joe Burrow is going to sit down. Okay, well Baker Mayfield's not playing for Cleveland. I don't understand. Okay, Joe Mixon's not going to play. Maybe he will. I don't know. He's on COVID. Like you said, who knows if he'll play? I don't know. I don't even care. The fact is that Cincinnati lost to Cleveland 41-16 not too long ago, and they're the playoff team. They're the team that's got the feel-good story. You can't tell me. First of all, they're not sitting everybody. they might sit about a handful of starters. That's still a lot of talent that's out there for Cincinnati that'll be playing. I think Allen is capable enough to go out there as a starting quarterback for 1 week and have a good game. I'm all over this. I am shocked that this line is 2-1 on the money line and 6.
Well, you got a division champion that's in this role against the last
Yeah.
team in the division, okay? And a last place team who arguably has quit on the football season. Now, without their leader, without other players, other starters here, I'm with you. I think this line is terribly wrong in the football game, and there's a major overreaction to one player, that being Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's most teams in the league would give their eye teeth to have Joe Burrow, and he's done a great job getting Cincinnati to where they are right now. But he's not a 10-point quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've also got another aspect in this football game which people don't realize, and it's the fact that Cleveland has taken Cincinnati out 3 straight games in a row.
There you go.
That becomes triple revenge for the division champions. And in my database, there's no better tool than division teams playing one another, and the other one has lost 3 times exact in a series, because they say that enough of the foolishness. We'll stop right here before it turns into domination. Three loss exact revenge works tremendously well in the National Football League, and I think it'll work with Cincinnati on Sunday as well.
Okay, and then you know what? I don't think they're going to win the game, but I think this line is too high. I know my team, and the Jets are playing their best football of the year, and they got one more game. They should have won last week. I get it, but they didn't. And I think because they lost, I think that they kind of feel, well, we got one more game, so it's a division opponent, whatever. But Zach Wilson is coming off the best game of his career. And he did it with a whole bunch of backups. And Braxton Berrios has been the talk of New York. That's how those are the players that he's playing with at this point. But they're playing hard. Again, just like I was saying with Atlanta, when you have a rookie coach, and especially I know my team, even if they're losing, the fact is they've laid a foundation. They played a lot of young players this year. They've had their share of key injuries, but they keep fighting. They're playing hard. They've rushed 4 straight games. They've had like 120, 150 yards or more. So they're running the ball. The offensive line is starting to understand their new system that they implemented this season. This is what happens when you have a young, rebuilding football team in the final week of the season. Buffalo did not play great last week against Atlanta, and they needed the second half in order to put that away. So I actually think this is going to be a second half football game as well. Buffalo more than likely wins the game. They'll put it away late, but that's a lot of points. And I just think that if the Jets play as good as they did last week, I think this could be a 4-quarter game. But I definitely will be surprised if it's not a second half game.
Well, this is a real tough football game for me here, because in Buffalo, you have a football team that really does not want to come up flat going into the playoffs.
No, they want to win the division too.
Absolutely. So, but here's the other take to that, and I'm just going to go off a little bit here. There is a contest that I play in my hometown in Cleveland, and it's a big money buy-in. There's 60 guys. Everybody puts in a huge amount of money, and you pick every game every week in the National Football League. I have a partner that I do this with, and every week I have to hear about Buffalo needs the game. And my answer to him is, yes, they do need the game, but they don't need to win by 20. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
So, that's what the reason the point spread is there for, okay, is the equalizer in a situation like this. Now,
what is that spread now?
17.
That's a lot of points. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like if the Jets were playing like Jacksonville. They're not playing like Jacksonville.
No, they're not. And you have to also realize that Buffalo may likely see Allen and the starters on the bench in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, especially if they have a lead.
Exactly right. They go in with a 21-point lead. They're not going to risk injury to those players in the fourth quarter of that football game. So there's plenty of backdoor here for the New York Jets in a contest like this. Yeah. So I agree with you. I know in the newsletter we called Buffalo by 20. And after the newsletter went to press, I said to myself that was probably the wrong number to put in a game like that because of these backdoor possibilities and so forth. I'm not going to play the game personally, but I would completely get it if the New York Jets cash this ticket.
I was kind of surprised that Buffalo took him to the second half last week, because I kind of felt that after the New England game, and I just felt, well, maybe they can kind of get going now, because they haven't put together like a really good 3 or 4 week stretch where they played really good football. And I think they kind of do need to get off to a good start and maybe put the Jets away early and feel good about themselves. And then you could say, okay, take the guys out, like you said. We've got our momentum back in a way. That's the thing that's holding me back from thinking Buffalo could win the AFC. I just don't think they put enough games, good quality games in a row together. But I really hope we get a Buffalo New England playoff game next week. I mean that's got to be, if that's the matchup, that's got to be the last game of the week. You would think that's got to be the premier matchup, wouldn't you think?
It would be must-watch television for sure. It would be, and Buffalo's the type of a team also that, if you're looking at playoff futures and hopefuls, you have to look at this football team. They bring a number one ranked defense into the game. Josh Allen's offense is more than capable of igniting and staying on fire throughout the course of a short 4-game playoff postseason. So they have to be.
Yeah, I'm actually posting them right now as we speak from my bookie. And you've got the Bills there at plus 680 as far as the Super Bowl futures are concerned. And Packers are the favorites at plus 310. Of course, we talked about this a few weeks ago that I took the Packers on this show at 6-1. So I'm feeling real good about that, getting them at the right time. And then Tennessee is down to 10-1. I picked them last week. We talked about them being a bargain at 16-1. So I grabbed them at 16-1. They're now 10-1. It is crazy that they can win the game, and they're probably going to. That's the other favorite I like this week, Tennessee against Houston. That they're going to win and they're going to be the first seed. I didn't even know that was possible. I thought Kansas City was going to be the first seed. Of course, they lost the game, so that's what opened it up.
But do they need to win the game by 11 points, on the road at Denver? That's another question you have to ask yourself.
That's true. Yeah, I'm staying away from that one. That's why.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But right now, I think the only other team that I'm considering right now, especially because they're 30-1, but they need to win the playoff game, is San Francisco, because that's like the one team because you always want to be able to, you're always thinking about those hot teams that come in late and nobody expects them to do anything, but they've got that playoff atmosphere around them that they've had to win games for like 2 or 3 weeks, especially if they win the game against the Rams on Sunday. That's their playoff game. So they're going to get off to a playoff start against everybody else. They're the dangerous team, and they're 30-1. They're, to me, now again, I liked Indianapolis and Tennessee when I got them, 16 and 40-1. But at 30-1, I have a hard time believing they'll win the Super Bowl still. But I think that's the team that I think may be able to go in with that kind of a mentality and maybe be dangerous in the playoffs.
Well, that's where you make your money, Greg, is you find a team like San Francisco, who is not yet in the playoffs, who can be in the playoffs and can be in the playoffs at a long price. Because if they do make the playoffs, they're the type of team that no one in the NFC is going to want to play.
And we'll talk about that, of course, next week. So that's going to be a lot of fun going over the playoffs. We'll have our playoff predictions, and then we'll put a wrap up to the college football season as well. So, Mark, it's 2022, so that means that college basketball is going to start to heat up in the newsletter and preoccupy a lot of your time. But we still have the NFL playoffs and one more college football game to go.
Yeah, that we do. And I'll say this, that we produce our first basketball weekly newsletter next week. So that'll be available when you and I get back together again, our first one of the year. And we'll touch a little bit on that from that point until we get to the March Madness.
Awesome. Mark, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, Greg, my pleasure as always. Be well, stay safe, and enjoy the games.